historian of science and medicine. Also, she's working as an exhibition curator. So she's mostly working as an editorial consultant, an independent scholar and curator. She has served as the acquisitions editor at the prestigious university presses such as University of California Press and the Rutgers University Press. She's been giving many seminars and workshops to writers, scholars who want to write and publish articles and books. So also as a historian of science and medicine, she's been writing many books, the topics of which range widely from medieval and Renaissance medicine to contemporary biomedical sciences. Her books include Botany in Medieval and Renaissance Universities, published in 1991, State of Health, New Jersey's Medical Heritage, 2001. I cannot go through all the list here. But as an independent curator, she has also organized exhibitions on New Jersey's medical history for the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, Rutgers University Libraries, and Middlesex County Culture and Heritage Commission. So she's working on museum exhibitions too. She did her undergraduate in biology at Stanford University, and a master's degree in botany from the University of Michigan, and a PhD in history of science from Harvard University. She was also a Mellon postdoctoral fellow at Bryn Mawr College. And also, she currently has served on the History of Science Society's Council and Publications Committee and several prize committees, including the History of Science Society's Pfizer Prize Committee, which is a prestigious award for the best book in the history of science. Now, please welcome Dr. Karen Reeds.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. 감사합니다. I think that's really the only word I know in Korean besides foods, and it's serving me very well. Thank you. Before I start, I wanted to make sure that you have at least one book from Lionel.
Oh, thank you very much.
There's not much science policy in there except tangentially, but perhaps the pictures are always good. Let me start by saying why I am at KAIST today. The most immediate reason is that I had a wonderful conversation with Professor Bum-Soon Park at the History of Science Society meetings in November. And that led to your generous invitation for me to give this workshop today. But the real reason that I'm here is because my husband Jim and I love stories. Most American kids get their stories through television. We grew up in homes that had no televisions, so we were unusual as Americans. And partly because of that, books were all the more important to us. And we have thousands and thousands of books in our house. And my own career path, even though I was trained at universities as a historian of science and medicine, as you heard, when I finished graduate school, I went into the world of publishing. I became an editor at first the University of California Press for about, 15 years? No, sorry, that was about 5 years, sorry. And then, losing track. And then when we moved from California to New Jersey, I became an editor at Rutgers University Press. I should write these on the board because I remember very vividly when I was a graduate student, I didn't have much French. And one of my professors was always talking about people, authors, and things in French, and I couldn't understand I couldn't connect the spelling to the way he pronounced them. So, let me... And Rutgers... is a really hard word, I think, for Koreans. So that's where I spent most of my time as the science and medicine editor. And this was, I left Rutgers University Press just at the moment that the internet became a reality, that Google, and even just before the search engines. But let me go back to this business about being a public, and so, let me turn back. Being a publisher was a very satisfying career for me for nearly 20 years. And although my husband and I were very enthusiastic early adopters of the internet, we were ridiculously slow about using it as a television. About a year ago, more or less, about a year ago, one of my sister-in-law introduced us to Hulu.com. Do you know all which does not work in Korea, I discovered. But essentially, it is a way to watch television and movies online for free.
I think it has Korean dramas on it.
Yes, and it has Korean dramas, exactly. So we happened to watch a cooking show by a Spanish chef, very entertaining, and in the way that the internet does, Hulu says, if you like this show, you might like something else. Mm-hmm. Well, it listed pasta, which I'm sure some of you have seen. And we saw pasta, and we were hooked. We were addicted to Korean television. We stopped taking out. I'm sure that if you looked at a record of our public library books, you know, how many we were checking out from the public library, the number of novels that we were checking out went way down as our consumption of television dramas went up. And we truly have spent many hours that we should have been doing other things, watching K-dramas and having a wonderful time at it. And Jim in particular became very interested in learning Korean, first from the subtitles and then more seriously from grammar books. And so his vocabulary and his knowledge and his ability to read Hangul is much better than certainly better than mine. So when he learned that there was a mathematics conference, he's a mathematician, that a mathematics conference was being held in Seoul, he persuaded his boss to send him. And we used this as the occasion for a long overdue vacation. And we've been here now just a week, and we've had a wonderful time. And I am very grateful for the chance to see this side of Korea, the academic, the scholarly side of Korea, as well as the sightseeing side and the food side. And we have been watching television in the hotel room, and it's very interesting to see how much we can follow the storyline without knowing the words. So, at any rate, it is really K-drama that is responsible for our coming here today. You heard that I am trained as a historian of science and medicine. My particular field is the field that I've done the most research on is medieval and Renaissance European science, biology and medicine in particular. And one of the articles that has had a very big influence on me is Okay, that dates me. And I put this up here because I think, first of all, it's a very good article in itself. And my guess is that you read very little before the 19th and 20th centuries in your work. So I have to put in a plug, put in something of my own special interest of medieval events. Guy Beaudoin, Motives and Opportunities for Science in Medieval Universities, edited by Alistair Crombie, Scientific Change, 1962. It's these two words, motives and opportunities, that I want to emphasize today, but I'm going to add one more. Motives, audiences, and opportunities. And that's, now let me get to the writing part of this. What I want to, I'm going to be addressing some general issues for writing, and strategies for publishing. And they fall under those three headings. The first one, motives. I think it's very important to think about your reasons for wanting to write something and to publish it. My brother, who is an expert on energy conservation, if you've heard about energy leaks and energy vampires, he's the guy who has publicized them. So that's a little advertisement for my brother. But the thing that he has a slogan, a little motto that he has on his computer is this. Is this really necessary? And I think that's an important question to ask. Writing is hard work. If you don't have to do it, why bother? But so when you think about it, what are your motives for writing any given piece of writing? Are you doing it strictly because it's expected? Well, first of all, if it's an assignment, all right, you got to do it. You're a student. You're required. Is it for your career? If you're a professor, yes, you almost certainly have to do it. You may not have. You then have to worry about what form it will take. But again, yes, it's necessary. But there are other reasons for writing. Is there a passion behind your writing? Is there some love of a subject, an idea that you really want to get across to other people? Do you want to convince somebody, an institution, an authority, a group of people to take action on a particular cause? That's another very good, important motive for writing. You just want to tell us a good story. I think you can tell. I think that's a very good reason to write something. Another reason people write is to go on an ego trip. They want to make themselves feel and look important by publishing. That, to me, is not a very good motive for doing it, but in some way it also is behind all the other motives of career, passion, exploring a new idea, taking an idea to an audience, telling a story, convincing an authority to take action. So you should feel as though part of you is invested in your writing, that you are, that your personality, your interests, your experience are very much part of the way the writing takes shape. And you shouldn't deny that as, put that aside. Don't be too modest, is what I'm saying. You have something to say. Don't be afraid to say, be confident in yourself. So those are motives. Audience. It's very important to know who your audience is and to think about who you are addressing. Who needs to know what you're talking about? Why do they need to know it? Again, that goes back to your motives. What can you assume that they already know? What seems too obvious to mention? I have learned the hard way that it is very easy to believe that everybody knows what you know. It isn't true. You have gained your knowledge by lots of experience, by reading, by talking with other people, and the people you are writing for don't always share that knowledge. So don't be afraid to spell out what's obvious to you, because it may be new to somebody else. And in giving this workshop, I'm doing that. Things I'm telling you are obvious to me as a writer and as an editor and as a reader, but they've been gained from long experience. I hope most of what I'm telling you is obvious, but I can't be sure. So it's better for me to spell it out. So think about now, who are the audiences for what you are writing? Are you only writing for fellow people, fellow academics, fellow scholars? Are you writing for policymakers, people in the government? Are you writing for the media? How are you going to get your word out beyond the university, beyond the policymakers, but to the general public? So those are audiences that you have to think about consciously as you write and decide which ones you are looking for. There's a particular example, a particularly important part of that is as you decide what you're writing, which of these you are writing. Obviously, if you're writing a thesis, that's because you're in academia, you're required to do that as part of what you're getting your credentials. But the way you write a thesis, the audience for your thesis, is different from the audience for the book. And it is also different from the audience for the article that should emerge from the thesis. With a thesis, you are typically addressing a very small number of readers. Your faculty, maybe the students around you, and if you're lucky, some of the people, the experts that you've been writing about. But theses don't usually have a very large audience. But I should ask, do the theses in this department have a regular method of getting published? Is there a series, or it's wherever you send it to the journals?
The department is too young.
The department's too young. Okay, good. Then you can start your own method. But the thesis, I mean, it's not surprising that a thesis should have a small audience, because you're still learning your job. You're still learning the techniques of writing, which are hard to begin with. They're always hard. But let me say they're to begin with. Writing is always hard. I've been writing for, I hate to think, since I finished my dissertation in 1975. Writing is still hard for me. Okay? So if you find it hard, don't worry, it will always be hard. And you have a lot of good company in finding it that way. So with the thesis, you're proving to your professors that you know the subject, you know you know the literature on the subject, you know the methodology, the approaches to it, and that you know how to ask a good question. Those are the main things that you're doing in a thesis. When it comes to turning a thesis, whether it's a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation, into a book, your audience becomes much bigger. It has to become much bigger, or a publisher will not publish it. But it also becomes a more lonely occupation. When you're a student, you at least have the company of other students who are going through the same thing, the same problems. You can ask each other questions. You should ask each other questions. Your department should encourage each other to share the difficulties. But when you try to turn it into a book, you're doing the sort of two things that go in opposite directions. You're writing for a much bigger audience, but you have far fewer people to share it with at the time. And the one thing that I hope this workshop will do is persuade you all to share your problems with each other as you're working on them. That's okay. I once heard this is a good morning for you. I was at a workshop I was at the weekly colloquium at the University of Pennsylvania, and there was a new PhD giving a talk, which was certainly a job talk. You know, she was presenting her work in hopes of getting a job at the University of Pennsylvania. And in the middle of it, her own cell phone went off. Now, she had a good excuse, because she was a new mother, a nursing mother, and her baby was in the next room, and the person who was watching the baby wanted to let her know that there was a problem. But when you give your own workshops, turn off your cell phone. Writing an article in a journal represents yet a different problem of audience. In effect, your first audience, you're looking for a bigger audience than you had for a thesis, but you have to find the right place to make that argument, to make your do your description of a case study, to just talk about the policy implications, and that so that the journal that you choose to send it to is part of the audience. Who reads that journal, who edits that journal, who publishes that journal, are all questions that you need to think about as you decide what are you going to put into, who are the audiences for your article. Now let me go on to opportunities. and this is related here, what is the best format for your argument, and for the motives that you have? Are you going to write thesis? Well, I mean, again, you're forced to. Do you turn it into a book? Do you turn it into a series of articles? Maybe you have something to say that doesn't really fit in either of any of these. You might, what are some other formats? Newsletters. Listservs. Blog. Magazine. Exhibitions. That's something that I have become interested in as a way of putting forth arguments and ideas. A website. And I'm sure you can add to that list because you probably are more media savvy than I am. Video, well, let me put video in there. The range of possibilities has vastly increased in the last 15 years. And the internet, of course, allows you to reach much larger audiences. In theory, you don't know if you're reaching them always, but at least in theory you can reach much bigger audiences and less obvious ones. With the journals, you know sort of who is going to read an article in a particular journal. You know more or less who's going to read the book, but you never know with the internet. And that's also, there's a danger there. And you've all heard these horror stories of putting out as an email or as a posting on a blog or something, something where you were very critical of somebody. And then, 10 years later, that person is the reviewer for your, referee for your manuscript. Be cautious, please. I mean, this is not just a matter of, this also goes for writing book reviews. I would add that it's something that I have found to be a very good way of enlarging my own knowledge and putting my name out in front of a large public. If you're writing a book review, even if you don't like the book, even if you think it's a lousy book, a terrible book, be kind. I mean, it is hard to write a book, and you should at least acknowledge that somebody took the time and the effort, and the publisher thought it was worth publishing. And that if you think it's just wrong-headed, be gentle in the way you explain it, because you never know what. It's better to make the friend than an enemy. There's an important issue talking more about formats, about print. Hard copy. And here I want to draw on the conversation I overheard at Jim's math conference just last week. The Math Society that was holding the conference was debating about whether to publish the conferences as they had been doing with Springer Verlag, the famous German publisher that publishes thousands and thousands of journals and books, or whether they should just publish directly on the internet without the intermediary of Springer. And the two issues that were very much on people's minds were reputation versus the reasons that there have been publishers all throughout the history of the printed book is partly a matter of capitalism. Somebody has to pay for the paper, the type, the distribution of the book, but also because the publisher becomes the gatekeeper. The publisher's name is a brand, and Springer Verlag is a brand that has had a very good reputation for many, 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 many years. But the mathematicians at this conference were becoming very annoyed with Springer because its editorial standards were dropping. They were not editing papers carefully. They were, when they published a second edition of a book, an important book, they didn't put any revisions in. They didn't even correct the mistakes. They didn't publish an errata slip. And that seemed to them, the mathematicians, a shocking lowering of standards on Springer Verlag's part, on the publisher's part. The publisher was no longer acting as a good gatekeeper. And in that case, is the name, the reputation that Springer Verlag has, the prestige that comes with publishing in a Springer journal, worth the poor standards? You want that reputation, even though the reputation is no longer justified. At least in this case, I won't speak for all of Springer. But versus the alternative, which is simply to publish on the internet, where it's immediately accessible. People don't have to pay for it the way they do for Springer Verlag journals. I'm sure that KAIST has this problem, like as every university does. How do you pay for these very, very expensive journals? On the other hand, for the society, there are costs associated with the going through the journal, going directly to the internet. They too will need to hire an editor to keep the standards up. Not just the editor who reads and chooses papers, but an editor who goes through word by word and makes sure that the math equations are correct, and that the writing is, the spelling is right, and all that. So this is a problem that is being faced by everybody who publishes now, and it's going to be one that all of you are going to have to think about as you decide about what format your work will take and what audiences you want to reach. How much time do we have? I've lost track of what our schedule is.
The usual meeting started at 2, but...
Okay.
Okay,
I'll keep talking. I stopped there because the next thing I wrote on here is the question of length. And that is one of the issues. I'm getting now into very practical matters that are issues when you are writing and looking for publishers. Especially when you're dealing with print. Editors are very worried about how long your article is or how long your book is. I spent 20 years as an editor at 2 university presses. And I would say almost every day I asked an author, a would-be author, how long is your manuscript? How long is your book? And I would tell them to count the words. Not just how many pages, because you can squeeze a lot of words onto a page depending on how you set it up. But how many words? It's a very important question for a publisher. Words cost money. Especially in the old days where you had a typesetter doing the typesetting. Now it's your time that you have to take into how long is the article. Paper costs money. The weight of the book costs money. So all of those are issues that a publisher worries about in asking you, how long is it? The same goes for journals. I was on the publications committee for the History of Science Society, and that meant we were constantly getting reports from the editor of ISIS and the University of Chicago Press about too many long articles and too many book reviews. And there was always a juggling of how would we fit in as much as possible without without the society having to pay the University of Chicago Press extra money to cover the more pages, extra length of the journal. So, I write this. So important.
Absolutely.
And the corollary, the thing that goes along with this is so shorter is better, not just because it costs money, but also because it makes you think harder about what you're including, how many details you need. Again, my brother's motto, is this really necessary, can be applied in every sentence, for every word, every paragraph, every chapter. Is this really necessary? Shorter is better. Again, you can't take this to the logical conclusion and not write at all. I mean, that's paralyzing. If you want to be in this business of scholarship and communication. But on the whole, shorter is better. And simpler is better because, again, it forces you to think about what the core of your argument is, and what your audience needs to know. And if it's written in simple language, the simpler language, you will reach a bigger audience. And you know this from your own reading. If somebody writes in a very difficult, dense, complicated way, you fall asleep. You don't want your readers to do that with your work. Make it clear. And let's at any rate, both of them. Now I think something that is interesting about this, just thinking about today and the issues of paper and print versus the internet, is I don't think we have figured out yet the best way to write for people who are reading online. The expectation when you're reading a book is that the argument will be linear. It'll start at A and go to Z, the end of it, passing through each step and turn. And that with the book, you can turn back and forth to, if you need to go back to understand something better. On the internet, it is it's so easy to jump from here to there, that the notion, that the idea of writing in a linear style is maybe no longer the best way to write when you know that your audience is going to be reading something on the screen, or, you know, this. And I think that's another, so that when you're writing, especially for the internet, but also for books, you're going to want to break up your page, your unit of thought into smaller pieces. And I think there are in fact intellectual dangers in that, even though it's my own preferred way of writing, that if you do have an argument that is complicated and needs a lot of explanation, to divide it up artificially this way sort of invites the reader not to concentrate on the flow of the argument. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think we've figured it out yet as a culture using the internet. It's brand new. Let's see. Jim and I were early adopters of the internet. I can remember writing my first grant application when our first daughter was a baby. She's now 30. Okay? That's just one generation, and as I say, we were early at this. She was literally nursed at the computer in a way that, well, you guys have all grown up with the internet. But even so, you're still grappling, you're still dealing with a lot of conventions that come from the past centuries of printed books. And I simply want to raise this as an issue. I can't solve it. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what books or writing on the internet will look like 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now, or what there will be in place of the internet then, assuming we have a world at all. But it is something that I think you should consider, how your readers will be, what format your readers will be seeing your work. You notice that I'm holding a piece of my notes on a piece of paper. I could have been sitting at a screen, sitting here with my notes in front of me at the laptop. I didn't want to do, I could have projected all this stuff on here. I didn't want to do that because I don't like having the screen in between me and you. I want to be able to see your faces. I don't want to keep looking down here like that. I find that irritating. But maybe to you it's so natural that it doesn't bother you. But to me it bothers me. If I had a technology that I would prefer to use, it would be the overhead projector. Does anybody have you all ever used an overhead projector? I'm sure you have. Okay, so that's a generation gap. Right there. So, I use. Should I actually write the word on the board? Draw a picture. It has a kind of. Sorry, this is not very useful. Transparency. Yeah, and then there's a screen, and it goes. Okay, but what this allowed you to do was stand here, and instead of having a screen in front of you, you'll have this plastic light. But it is still closer to the audience than a laptop is. But I do, as I say, I do think that whether we like it or not, internet is going to be the place where more and more and more of what we write is published and finds its readership. And we have to keep in mind the format as we do it. And I would add this along those lines, simpler, clearer. That goes, since we have all become our own typesetters, we do our own typing and we do our own formatting. Keep those simple too. Don't clutter up the page with distractions to the eye. Don't use lots of different, don't use boldface and italics and underlining and all the things that we can do with these wonderful varieties of type fonts and ways of showing print on the screen. You don't need to use them all, but think about what will be the easiest, the clearest, the simplest for your reader. And while I'm thinking about that, those of you who sent me samples, here, I want to, first of all, thank you all for doing that. When you send out something to an editor, put on each page a header that gives your name, your email address, the page number. And when you're doing it for yourself, write down the draft number that you've got. So, your header should have the page, your name, title, or short title. And for your own use, as you're working on something, put the draft number and save each draft. Save each draft. How many of you have lost something because you haven't backed it up? So save, back up. But if you number the drafts and date them, you will save yourself a lot of time. And this is, again, advice learned the hard way. When you're working on your own drafts, then it does make sense to use all those useful colors so that you can distinguish between stuff that you wrote before, stuff that is new. I have to first pay you a compliment. In all the writing samples that I saw, everything was really clearly organized and structured. I could follow how your ideas very easily. And I think that is a tribute to both your teachers and to you. To do that in any language is hard enough. I have always trouble doing that, as Jim will tell you, trying to figure out what my real argument is, what are the steps, the best way to explain the argument. I find that very difficult in my native language. To do it in another language, and I know for some of you it's even your third language, and to be able to do that clearly to a reader is, I think, just admirable. And I congratulate you all on that. In trying to figure trying to figure that out, I would like to actually hear from you, maybe over dinner, how you are taught to organize a paper, to write. Because I think American students, if I had a similar sample of writing from a group of American graduate students, I don't think the quality of organization and argument would be as good. I really don't. So thank you for that, and congratulations. When I give this talk to American graduate students or even would-be scholars, people with PhDs who are trying to write a book, I have to keep telling them how to make little outlines that are thought outlines, outlines to help them think an argument. So there might be a keyword, a bunch of bullet points, maybe something over here that needs to go, so that it becomes very messy. But it's important for them to see how to pull together ideas. Because in school, we're taught, and maybe you are too, and also the Microsoft Word makes you do this. You have this kind of strict hierarchy of, is that how you were taught to organize things? But in practice, maybe in the end, that's what it looks like. But as you're writing, it's this messy kind of thing, and then you move it over there. And so, as strategies of writing, this is an important stage that teachers often do not tell you about. And I would say, even though what I saw was admirable in the way it follows this kind of structure, you should know that this is okay and important, and it gets erased in what you read in the printed matter. That, like science, you're taught, in science you're taught all about, you have a hypothesis, that this standard model of you have an hypothesis, you look at your assumptions, you test the assumptions, you have a control, and then see whether it worked, the hypothesis holds up. You know that in a real laboratory, things are much messier, that they don't work out. You drop the test tube. Having one of the things that I enjoy doing is helping teenagers in a very poor high school in New Jersey with science projects. And so I've seen all this firsthand of how many ways an experiment that should be very simple can go wrong. And it's, of course, much more so when you have a real lab and many more things to consider. Let's see, we've got a little more time. Okay. I want to give you a strategy for thinking about, in particular, books, but I think it works as well for articles and many other kinds of writing. Earlier about writing book reviews and how they've been something I've enjoyed doing. I should say that as an independent scholar, that is somebody who has no academic appointment with a university, who does scholarship really for the love of it, when I was working as an editor at a university press, I didn't have much time to do research, sustained research and writing. So I concentrated on writing book reviews. And I wrote lots and lots and lots of short book reviews. I recommend it to you all as a way of, first of all, increasing your libraries, because you get to keep the book, and as a way of extending your own knowledge, and a way of getting your name out in the scholarly world. So that's the first recommendation. But the other part of it is, when you're thinking about your own book, imagine what the ideal book review of your book, your thesis, would be. Where you would want to see it published. Who you would want to have that reader be. Who is the scholar you would most want to praise your book. Write that book review. It doesn't have to be long, but write the review. What will it say about why your book is so good that it deserves this book review from the best scholar in the field? You write that book review, then you take out all the compliments, you put it over your computer, you write the book that matches that. It's the platonic ideal, if you will, of your book. Another way to think about it, grab a book. Well, here, I'll use mine. When you write a book, assuming it gets published in hardcover, even if it doesn't, ebooks and so on, somebody has to write this stuff. This is what's called the jacket blurb. All right, and somebody has to write it, and usually the way it's done is the publisher tells the author, give us 200 words, that just gives the essence of your book. What's this book about? In a way that will make people want to read it. Okay? Well, that's like writing the book review, right? And if you're going to publish a book, you're going to have to write that kind of thing. If you write it badly, there will be some very junior person at the publishing house who rewrites it in the form that the publisher wants it. It will not do your book justice. It will not be a good way of selling your book. If you know the book better than anyone else, you write it in such a way they'll say, oh, this is perfect, we won't change a word. Or maybe one word. And if you keep it short, they'll be even happier. Okay? Because then they can make it even shorter. You can give them two versions, the 25-word version and the 200-word version. 25-word version is the one that goes in the advertising. And that's what you want. You want to start selling your book right from the beginning. The very first person you're selling your book to is the editor at the publisher, at the publishing house. And as a colleague of mine at the University of California Press, a very distinguished editor, said, if an author doesn't think enough of me as a reader to make me want to read beyond the first sentence, why should I consider this book? So think about that first sentence. Think about what are you going to do to grab the attention of that editor and ultimately your readers. And I'll give one example from the writing samples. And I'm not going to name the author because I'm going to get it wrong. But science is expensive. That is a wonderful beginning for it immediately grabs my attention. Science is expensive. Okay, where is it going to go from there? That is a proposal or an opening that is going to get that author a publisher. If you could, so try out those first sentences on each other. Think about them as you're falling asleep. Think about them in the shower. How are you going to start what you say in a way that people will want to read it? And I think maybe that's a good place to end. So, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Are there questions now?
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise,
we have time
can.
for questions.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I will use four slogans, including your brothers.
Okay.
I will print it out then and put it in the graded student. Shorter is better, simpler is better, clearer is better. Is this really necessary?
You don't want to put that on last.
In fact, I emphasize similar things, but the problem is not listening.
Well, that is why there are consultants.
Yeah, exactly.
The consultants can come, tell you what you already know, and then go away. And you can decide whether to pay any attention or not. My feelings will not be hurt if you don't write better after this.
Any questions?
I think when we talk individually, it'll be easier for the questions to be directed to your own particular purpose, and so I'm not worried if there are questions now.
I had a question about the length of the book
Yes.
published by Academic Press, that which is going shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yes.
And so I think typically now they publish 100,000 words.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my question is about chapters.
Mhm.
Would you suggest more chapters with a shorter length, or just like a 3-4 chapters, also with
I
long
think
chapters?
That's a very good question, and I'm afraid the answer is going to be it depends,
Right.
which is very irritating. But I think it really does depend on both your own individual style of presentation and the particular subject that you're dealing with. If you've got, when I think of if you've got 100,000 words, and this is something I've done many times with authors and with myself, 100,000 words. Okay. That is, these days, a sort of typical length for an academic book. That's what an editor will tell you to deal with. Okay. I said shorter is better. Think 80,000 words, because you know you're going to say more than it does. You're going to overflow, so you might as well start thinking lower. All right. Then, take a piece of writing that you're happy with, where you think you've really done a good job of putting forth an argument, the examples, the details, and the notes in one place. I don't care whether it's an article or even a talk at a conference. Take something like that where you're really happy with it and count the words in it and say, okay, this is how much information, how much of an argument I can get across in 8,000 words or 3,000 words or 10,000 words, whatever that particular paper is. Use that as your own model for deciding how to break up your 80,000 words. I mean, the temptation is to say, 80,000 words, okay, 20,000 words per chapter, times 4 chapters. Okay. But you need an introduction. How many words? You need a conclusion. Very important. Are you going to have appendices? How long are your notes going to be? Your bibliography. Because as far as the publisher is concerned, those are all words. They don't care whether they're helping your argument along or not. That's why they don't count the index. You could be paying, and that's why some of the indexes are so bad. They don't count the index. And if you prepare a good index, they will be annoyed because then it's too many words. Indexes are either the publisher will hire an indexer, and you may have to pay for that, or you do your own index. And they will tell you how long the index has to be, essentially. And I think that increasingly indexes are getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
One of the best compliments I've ever gotten as an author, publisher, editor, whatever, is that the historian of medicine who wrote the foreword for this, David L. Cowan, told me that this was one of the best indexes he had ever read. So please, you can use this as a model, but it is longer than it should be from the point of view of the press. But you've already seen it. My point here is you have to take all of these into account when you're thinking of your 80,000 words. And that's one of the reasons the 80,000 expands to 100,000 before you know it. So in effect, if you're going to have 4 chapters, you're really talking about 10 to 15,000 words per chapter. So, another way, look at something you've written that is 10 to 15,000 words. How much can you pack into that? And then again, use that as your own little measurement of the word count. And of course, computers do make it easy to keep track of word counts. So you can keep going as you're writing. You can always be measuring how many words you're using up, and think, do I really need? Are these words really necessary? Again, it works. It helps a great deal. So that doesn't really answer your question about many small chapters versus several longer ones. I think, let me give a different way of thinking about it. When you have many small chapters, each one of them serves more as a kind of exhibit in an exhibition. At least that's how it seems to me. And the temptation for the reader is to wander around more. In an exhibition, you don't know, as a curator for an exhibition, I can't be sure what order people will see individual artifacts or documents or pictures. So each label for that artifact or picture has to be complete in itself. I can't. It can contribute to an overall argument, but I can't be sure that the person seeing it has read all the other labels or all the panel descriptions. So each little chapter has to, in some way, encapsulate the whole theme of the book in itself, while being a very interesting example or step of the argument in itself. Does that make sense? I think we better stop. But
Right.
Get some.
Okay. So thank you again.
Thank you.